In the attic of a house that two sisters had come at last to empty, there was an old child's music box that had not been wound in the whole year since their mother died. It was a small thing, painted once in pale blue, the paint worn soft at the corners by two little girls' hands a lifetime ago, and tucked beneath the velvet lining, folded small and hidden, where no one would ever think to look, were 12 years of secret notes, one for every single year that these two sisters had not spoken a word to each other. Neither of them knew the notes were there. Neither of them had wanted to come. They had not stood in the same room in 12 years, these two grieving, gray-haired women. And they would not be standing in one now if the house did not have to be emptied and sold. The rain was coming down soft and steady on the attic roof above them, and what they were about to find, folded beneath the velvet of a child's music box, was going to do in one rainy afternoon what their mother had not been able to do in 12 long years of hoping. Welcome to the Lamplit Hour, where every story is a small light left on for someone who needs it. If stories like this bring you comfort, take a moment to subscribe and stay a while. So let the rain keep falling soft on the old roof, and let the gray afternoon light come slanting through the one small attic window, and let us climb the stairs into that dusty, memories-crowded room with the two sisters who did not want to be there. Let me tell you about Joan and Diane and the music box their mother wound alone. They had been close once. That was the part that made it all so much sadder. They had not always been strangers. Joan and Diane Hartley had grown up 2 years and 1 bedroom apart in this very house, had whispered to each other across the dark after the lights were out, had fought and made up 1,000 times the way sisters do, had stood up for each other at school and worn each other's clothes without asking, and known each other for the first 20 years of their lives better than anyone else on earth knew either of them. There is a particular closeness between sisters near in age, a closeness woven out of shared blood and shared rooms and shared childhood, and Joan and Diane had it. They had built a whole secret country between them, the way children do. Private words no one else understood, a code of taps on the wall between their beds, a pact that whichever of them married first would make the other the godmother of her first child. When Diane was 7 and terrified of the dark, Joan had let her climb into her bed every single night for a whole winter, and never once told their parents, never once teased her for it, because that is what an older sister is for. When Joan was 16 and her heart was broken for the first time, it was Diane, 14, who sat with her on the bathroom floor and let her cry and hated the boy with a fierce, loyal hatred on her sister's behalf. They had been, for the first 2 decades of their lives, the truest thing in each other's world. And that is exactly why the silence that came later was so total, so hard, so impossible to cross. You cannot be coldly estranged from someone you were never close to. Only the people who were once your whole world can become, through enough hurt and enough pride, the stranger you cross the street to avoid. The deepest silences grow only in the places where the love was once deepest. The break had come 12 years ago, in the worst possible season, the weeks just after their father died. Grief does terrible things to families. It takes people who are already broken open with sorrow and sets them against each other over things that, in any other season, would never have mattered. For Joan and Diane, it had been the house and the money and 100 small wounds that had nothing really to do with the house. or the money at all. There had been a will and a disagreement about what their father would have wanted, and words said in a lawyer's office that should never have been said. Words about who had done more, who had been there more, who had loved him more. The cruelest and most pointless accounting in the world. Diane, the younger, had said something unforgivable. Joan, the older, had said something worse back, and then both of them, being heartless, being proud, being their father's daughters, in exactly the way that hurt the most, had turned and walked away from each other, each certain she was the wounded party, each waiting for an apology that the other was equally certain she was owed. And the apology had never come from either of them for 12 years. It is worth saying because it is the truest and saddest part that neither of them could even have told you by the end exactly what the fight had really been about. The house was sold or not sold. The money was divided. The practical things were settled within a few months, the way practical things always are. What remained was not about any of that. What remained was the words, the thing Diane had said about Joan never really loving their father, only performing it. The thing Joan had said back about Diane being a taker, a child still, who had drained their parents dry and given nothing. These were not true things. That was the terrible part. They were the cruelest possible lies, the kind you reach for precisely because you know exactly where your sister is softest, the kind only someone who has loved you their whole life knows how to aim. And once said, they could not be unsaid. They sat between the two sisters like broken glass on a floor, and as the years passed, neither of them could find a way to walk back across that floor without being cut, and so neither of them crossed it at all. Pride told them it was principle. It was not principle. It was only two frightened, grieving women, each waiting by a telephone that the other was too proud to pick up, each year making it a little harder, until 12 years had gone by, and the silence had become simply the shape of their lives, a thing they no longer questioned, a closed door they had stopped even seeing. If this story is finding its way to you, a quiet light helps me keep the lamp lit for others. What neither of them had fully let themselves understand in all those years of silence was what it had done to their mother. Vera Hartley had buried her husband, and in the same season watched her two daughters tear themselves apart. And she had spent the last 12 years of her life caught in the middle of a silence she had not caused and could not heal. She had loved them both. She had refused to the very end to take a side, though both daughters had pressed her to, and her refusal had cost her something with each of them. Joan thought their mother too soft on Diane. Diane thought their mother secretly favored Joan, and both of them, in their hurt, had pulled a little away from Vera too, so that the old woman spent her final years not only grieving her husband, but slowly losing by inches the closeness of both the children she had left. She saw Joan on some holidays. She saw Diane on others. She was careful, always, never to mention one to the other, because the one time she had tried, the one time she had gently said to Diane, "Your sister asked after you." Diane had gone cold and changed the subject, and Vera had learned not to try again. There were small, terrible accommodations that the silence forced on her, and Vera made every one of them without complaint, because that is what mothers do. She learned to have 2 Christmases, a quiet, sad doubling of every holiday, Joan on the day itself, and Diane on the day after, or the other way around. so that her own celebrations were always half empty, always missing one of the two faces she most wanted to see. She kept two sets of photographs and was careful which ones she had out when which daughter visited. When she was in the hospital that last year, she gave the nurses strict instructions about visiting times so that her girls would never accidentally arrive together and have a scene at her bedside. Even dying, she was protecting them from each other, managing their war, smoothing it over, sparing everyone but herself. And on the ordinary days, the long, ordinary days in between visits, she sat alone in the house where she had raised two daughters who had loved each other once, and she missed the sound of them. And she climbed the attic stairs on her bad hips once a year to wind a child's music box and make a wish and hide a note where no one would find it. She carried them separately. She held half her heart in each hand and was never in 12 years allowed to bring the two halves together. She died that way. She died with her two daughters still not speaking, having never once in 12 years been able to sit at her own table with both of her children at the same time. No mother should have to die like that. Vera did. The silence had cost more than the two sisters, too. It had cost a whole generation that came after them. Joan had grandchildren that Diane had never met. Diane had grandchildren that Joan would not have recognized on the street, cousins who should have grown up together. Summers at their grandmother's house, the whole warm tangle of an extended family, had instead grown up as strangers in separate halves of the family split down the middle, knowing of each other only as names that made the grown-ups go quiet. Vera had seen this too and grieved it too. Every Christmas card with a new baby in it that she could show to only one side of the family, every milestone that half her descendants never heard about. A silence between two people is never really between just two people. It spreads. It reaches down into the years that have not even happened yet and quietly steals them. That was the truest measure of what 12 years of pride had cost, and neither sister had let herself add it up until they were sitting on the attic floor with their mother's notes in their hands. And the worst of it, the part that Joan and Diane would only understand on this rainy afternoon in the attic, was that their mother had never stopped hoping. She had never once decided that it was hopeless, never once let herself believe that her girls were lost to each other for good. She had hoped quietly and stubbornly and entirely alone every single day of those 12 years. And she had left, hidden in the most ordinary object in the house, the record of that hope. The music box had been theirs as children. Their father had brought it back from somewhere, years and years ago, and it had sat on the dresser in the room the two girls shared. And every night when they were small, their mother would wind it, 3.5 turns of the little brass key, never more, because more would strain the spring. And a thin, sweet, slightly out-of-tune melody would tinkle out into the dark while the two sisters drifted off to sleep in their twin beds. It was the sound of their whole childhood, that tune. It was the sound of safety, of their mother's hand on the key, of being small and warm and loved and not yet old enough to break each other's hearts. They had both forgotten it existed. It had been packed away in the attic for 40 years, or so they thought. What they did not know was that their mother had not forgotten it at all. What they did not know was that every year, on the anniversary of the day her daughters had stopped speaking, Vera Hartley had climbed the steep attic stairs on her aching hips alone, with a flashlight in the later years when her eyes began to go and had knelt by the cardboard carton under the eaves and had taken out the pale blue box that had sung her two little girls to sleep, and had wound it 3.5 turns, the same thin, sweet melody tinkling out into the empty, dusty attic, into the silence of a house that no longer held the sound of her daughters. And the old woman would sit on the attic floor in the dark and listen to the song of her girl's childhood. And she would write her name, and she would tuck it under the velvet with all the others, and she would make her wish. And then she would climb back down the stairs to her empty kitchen and her 2 separate Christmases and her carefully managed war, and she would carry on hoping for another year. 12 times she did this. 12 times she climbed those stairs to wind a music box and pray over it like a candle in a church. Nobody knew. Nobody was meant to know until the day which she trusted would come, even though she would not live to see it, when her 2 girls would climb those same stairs together and find what she had left. And now here they were, Joan, 66, and Diane, 64, 2 old women with their dead mother's house to empty and a silence 12 years deep standing between them like a wall of glass. They had arranged it through the lawyer so they would not have to speak more than necessary. They would clear the house together because neither could afford to pay someone to do it, and neither would let the other do it alone. And they would divide what was to be divided, and they would sell the house, and then presumably they would go back to their separate lives and their separate silences and never see each other again. That was the plan. They were polite to each other in the brittle, careful way of people who have hurt each other too deeply for politeness to mean anything. You take that box. No, you haven't. Fine. They worked in different rooms. They did not eat together. Those first 2 days in the house were a particular kind of torment, the kind only families know. Everywhere they turned, there was their childhood, their whole shared past, laid out in objects neither of them could touch without remembering. The kitchen, where their mother had stood for 50 years. The marks on the doorframe, where she had measured them growing up. 2 columns of pencil lines, climbing the wood side by side. The good china that came out at Christmas, the Christmases they no longer shared. They moved through it all carefully, separately, each pretending the other was not also undone by it, each retreating to a different room when the feeling got too big. Once on the first evening, they reached for the same photograph at the same moment, the 2 of them, as little girls, gap-toothed, arms around each other, squinting into a long ago summer sun, and their hands almost touched, and they both pulled back as if burned, and Diane said, "You keep it," in a voice gone subtly thick, and left the room. 12 years of practice at avoiding each other, and the house would not let them. The house remembered when they had loved each other, even if they had spent 12 years trying to forget. And on the second afternoon, with the rain coming down on the roof, they found themselves both in the attic at the same time, because the attic was the last of it, the deepest layer, the place where the oldest things were kept. If you are still with me, in the warm and the quiet, stay close. We are coming to what they found. It was Diane who found the music box in a cardboard carton under the eaves, wrapped in an old pillowcase, gone yellow with age. She unwrapped it without knowing what it was, and then she went very still, because she knew at once. Her hands knew before her mind did, the way the body remembers the things the heart has buried, the pale blue paint, the little brass key. She turned it over in her hands, and across the attic, Joan looked up at the sudden silence and saw what her sister was holding. And something moved across Joan's face too, some old soft thing from before all the hardness. Neither of them said anything. Diane, almost without deciding to, wound the key 3.5 times. No more, the way their mother had, the muscle memory of 60 years ago still in her fingers, and lifted the lid, and the thin, sweet, out-of-tune melody tinkled out into the dusty attic, into the gray, rainy light, exactly as it had every night of their shared childhood. And both old women were, for one helpless moment, small girls again in twin beds. Before any of it, before the lawyer's office and the cruel words of the 12 hard years, Diane's eyes filled. She turned away so her sister would not see. Old pride dies hard. And that was when she noticed that the velvet lining at the bottom of the box was loose at one corner. She thought at first it was only age, the old glue giving way. But when she lifted the loose corner of the velvet, she found that the lining had been deliberately peeled back and replaced many times by careful old hands, and that underneath it, filling the false bottom of the music box, was a thick little stack of folded papers, dozens of them. Small squares of notepaper, each one folded the same careful way, each one soft and worn as though it had been handled, taken out and read and folded again, many times over. Diane's hands were shaking now. She unfolded the one on top. It was their mother's handwriting, that familiar slanting hand, grown shakier in the later notes than the earlier ones, and it was dated. And it began, "My dear girls." "Joan," Diane said. It was the first time she had said her sister's name aloud, to her face, in 12 years. The word came out strange and cracked, a word she had not let herself shape in all that time, and saying it broke something loose in her chest. "Joan, you need to see this. It's from Mom." Joan crossed the attic slowly. She had spent 12 years keeping a careful distance from her sister, an instinct so deep it was almost physical now, and crossing those few feet of dusty floorboards cost her something she could not have named. But she crossed them. She knelt down beside Diane, closer than she had been to her sister in over a decade, close enough to smell the same soap their mother had always bought, the soap Diane apparently still used, and the smell of it undid Joan a little before she had even read a word. She looked down at the little stack of folded papers in her sister's shaking hands, and she recognized instantly the handwriting on the top one, that beloved slanting hand that had signed her birthday cards and labeled her lunch bags and written her name on the inside cover of every book she was ever given as a child. "Oh," Joan said softly, "oh, that's Mom's." And the two of them, who had not willingly sat side by side in 12 years, sat down side by side on the attic floor. They sat down together on the dusty attic floor, two old women in the gray, rainy light, and they read their mother's notes in order, from the first to the last, and what they read broke 12 years of silence as if it had been nothing, as if it had been paper, which is all, in the end, that pride ever is. There was one note for every year. Vera had written the first one the very year her daughter stopped speaking, and she had hidden it in the music box, in a box that had sung them to sleep when they still loved each other. And she had wound the box 3.5 turns and made a wish and put the note underneath. And she had done it every year after. 12 notes, 12 years. Each one was short. Each one was addressed to both of them. "My dear girls, my darling, my two," as though she were writing to them together, even though she could never gather them together in life. And each one said, in its own quiet way, the same impossible, patient, heartbroken thing. The early ones were full of a fresh, raw hoping. My dear girls, it has been a year now, and my heart is not whole and will not be until you are whole with each other. I wound the box tonight and wished, as I have wished every night, that you will find your way back. You were each other's first friend. Please remember that. The middle ones grew sadder, more tired, but never bitter, never accusing, never taking a side. My darlings, another year. I dreamed last night that you were both at my table again, laughing, the way you used to, and I woke and the house was so quiet. I am not angry at either of you. I only miss the sound of the two of you together. It was the best sound this house ever held. And the later ones, the shaky-handed ones, began to speak of time running out. My too. I am getting old now, and I have made my peace with most things, but not with this. I do not think I will get to see it. But I am leaving these here, in your box, the one that knew you when you loved each other, in case someday you are emptying this house together and you find them. If you are reading this side by side, then it happened, and I can rest. Oh, I do hope you are reading this side by side. And the last note. The last note was dated 3 weeks before Vera died. The hand was very weak. It said only this: My dear girls, if you have found these, then you are together in this house at last. And that is all I ever wanted. And you must not waste another moment of it being proud. Life is so short, my darlings. I know that better than anyone now. You are sisters. You were each other's first friend, and you can be each other's last. Me in the box. Make up. I love you both the same, completely, always. Mama. For a long while, neither sister could speak at all. The rain came down on the roof. The music box had wound down to silence between them. And then Joan, the older, the proud one, the one who had said the worst thing 12 years ago in the lawyer's office, made a sound that was half a sob and half her sister's name. And Diane turned to her, and the two old women fell into each other's arms on the dusty attic floor and wept the way you weep only for the years you cannot get back. 12 years. 12 years their mother had wound that box alone and wished alone and hoped alone, and it had taken her death and her hidden words to do what her living voice had never been allowed to do. They held each other and said the words at last, both of them, over and over, the apologies that had been 12 years too long in coming and were not even now too late, because that is the mercy of it. While there is still one sister left to say it to, it is not too late. They did not sell the house. That was the first thing they decided, sitting on the attic floor with their mother's notes spread around them and the rain easing off the roof. They could not now. How could they sell the house their mother had filled with 12 years of hoping for exactly this moment, the house that had finally, in its dusty attic, given them back to each other? They kept it. They come back to it now, the two of them, on the same holidays instead of separate ones. They sit at their mother's table together, both of them, at last, the thing Vera was never allowed to see. And the children and grandchildren who had grown up thinking of the two sisters as a feud, a coldness, a thing never spoken of, come too. And the house is full again of the sound their mother said she missed the most, the two of them together, laughing. The first Christmas they spent together in the old house, all of them, was a strange and wonderful thing. The cousins who had never met at last, shy at first, and then within an hour, the way children always are, thick as thieves, running up and down the same stairs their grandmothers had run up and down 60 years before. Joan and Diane stood in the kitchen doorway and watched them, two old women who had nearly let all of this slip away forever, and neither of them could speak. On the mantel where they had set it, the pale blue music box caught the light from the fire. And at some point in the evening, without a word, Diane went and wound it 3.5 turns, no more, and the thin, sweet, out-of-tune melody tinkled out over the noise of the gathered family, the children and the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren, over the whole warm, crowded room that their mother had wished into being from the bottom of a box, alone in the dark 12 times. And Joan crossed the room and stood beside her sister, and the two of them listened to their childhood play out into a house that was full again, and they did not say anything because there was nothing left that needed saying. It had all been said on the attic floor. The rest was just living it. They spent the rest of that rainy afternoon in the attic, and they did not clear another box. They read the notes again, all 12 slowly, out loud this time, taking turns, each in their mother's voice as best they could remember it. They laughed in places. Vera had a dry wit even in her sorrow, and some of the notes scolded them gently. You are both being ridiculous, and you know it. And they wept in others, and somewhere in that long afternoon, the 12 years simply dissolved, the way a thing that was never as solid as it seemed was sometimes dissolved all at once. They talked finally about the things they had not let themselves say in 12 years. Diane told Joan she had been wrong, so wrong about their father, that she had said it to wound and had regretted it for a decade and had been too proud to call. Joan told Diane that the thing she had said back was the worst thing she had ever done in her life, that she had picked up the phone 100 times over the years and put it down again, that she had read about Diane's grandchildren in the Christmas letters their mother forwarded and ate to know them. They gave each other back the 12 years in a single afternoon, not the time itself, which was gone, but the love that had been waiting underneath, the time, the whole while, patient as their mother's hope, unspent. And the music box sits on the mantel now, where they can both see it. They wind it sometimes. When they are there together, 3.5 turns, no more, and the thin, sweet, out-of-tune melody tinkles out into the room, and the two old sisters go quiet and listen, and they are small girls again for a moment, and they are also two old women who came within a hair's breadth of dying as strangers, and they are grateful every single time, past all words, for a mother who would not give up on them, even when they had given up on each other. There is a thing that happens when you lose a parent that no one quite prepares you for. You become suddenly the keeper of all the love they were carrying. Vera had carried her daughter's love for each other through 12 years of silence, kept it safe, refused to let it die, even when the two of them had abandoned it. And now that she was gone, that love had to live somewhere, or it would die with her. And the music box on the rainy afternoon had handed it back to the only two people left who could carry it. Joan and Diane understood this, sitting on the attic floor. They understood that their reconciliation was not only for themselves, it was the last thing they could do for their mother, the only thing she had ever asked of them. The wish she had wound into a child's music box 12 times in the dark. To stay apart now, after reading those notes, would have been to let her die a second time, and for good. To come back together was to keep her alive, to keep alive the best thing she had made, which was not the house and not the china, but the two of them and the love between them that she had guarded with her whole patient heart. So if there is a silence in your own family tonight, a brother you do not call, a sister you cross the street to avoid, a door you slammed so long ago you have half forgotten what was even behind it, let Joan and Diane be a quiet word in your ear. Pride is only paper. It feels like stone for years and years, and then one day you unfold it and see that it was only ever paper, and you wonder how you let it cost you so much. You do not have to wait for a music box full of your mother's grief to find your way back. You do not have to wait until the house is being emptied. You can wind the box yourself tonight in your own heart and make the wish and pick up the phone. Life is so short, my darlings. The people who knew you when you were small, who whispered to you across the dark after the lights went out. There are not so very many of them, and there will not be more. Do not let the last of them become a stranger. Do not make someone hide their hope for you in the bottom of a box. The rain has stopped now over the old house. The attic is quiet. Two sisters sit on the floor among their mother's notes, holding hands the way they did when they were small and afraid of the dark, found at last, given back to each other at last, by a mother whose love was patient enough to wait 12 years and wise enough to leave it where they would someday find it. And you can let your eyes close now, knowing that it is never, while two people both still breathe, too late to wind the box and make it right. There is only the soft after rain quiet, and the sisters reunited, and the long, good rest of a hope that came true in the end. Thank you for spending this hour with me. If this story kept you company tonight, subscribe, and I'll leave the light on for you next time. Rest well.